Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my epic rant on the 2024 remake, The Crow. Now, this, in my opinion, is a giant pile of bird droppings that stinks to high heaven, and it is without a doubt a contender for one of the worst films of 2024, and honestly the worst remake that I've seen since something like RoboCop in 2014. Everything about this movie, for the most part, sucks, and this is a film that should have never gotten off the ground to begin with. This is a franchise that should have stayed dead and should have remained dormant, but for whatever reason, Lionsgate decided that, hey, we got the rights to The Crow, so let's make another Crow movie. Despite the fact that no other attempt to make a Crow film has worked or been worth a shit or been any good since 1994. Now, before I go any further, clipping this film's wings and shoving them up its feathery ass, I would like to give a special shout out to Brock for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, I had absolutely no faith in this film from the beginning. As soon as this was announced, I was hoping that, like all of the other attempts to remake The Crow, it would have died and been buried. But nope, this one actually got made. And here's the thing that's really frustrating about this, is that it actually does try to do something different, but it still fails. So it's one of those remakes that is a prime example of how you can change things up. You can switch some things around in terms of the story and the plot, and it can still suck and be completely unnecessary. Now, The Crow is directed by Rupert Sanders. And Rupert Sanders is a director who has a very divisive reputation. His first film was Snow White and the Huntsman, and I think he did a really good job with that. His next film that he did after that, it was Ghost in the Shell. And I honestly felt that he did a equally as good job with that as well. And I've actually been in his corner since Ghost in the Shell. I still feel that he got too much flack for directing that. And he wasn't anywhere near as responsible for that film's box office failure, if you ask me. And I still like that film for what it is. So he's shown that he can actually do some decent work as a director. And he has shown that he actually has a pretty keen visual eye, but not with this movie. And I think the reason for that is that his heart was never fully in this. He didn't have much genuine passion for this film at all. Now, I know Rupert will say otherwise in interviews. He will say that he was very passionate about it, and he really wanted to do it, and he was a big fan of The Crow and James O'Barr's comics, and he wanted to do it justice and do his own vision. And I know he will say all of that, and he said all of that to the press. But I don't buy it, because you don't see the passion, and you don't see the life, and you don't see that energy in his direction. Say whatever you want about Ghost in the Shell, that's not a poorly directed film. That film has some absolutely stunning visuals in this. There isn't a single shot in this that could be considered to be on par with the best that that film has to offer visually. The direction in this was stale. It was stagnant. It was just not very energetic. It was a lifeless corpse for most of the movie, except for maybe a couple bits of action. But other than that, there's a lot of uninspired and just strange directing choices that don't really seem like it's from a place of love for what the director is doing. It just seems like it's a director just throwing some shit at a wall and hoping it sticks. Oh, let me do a weird camera angle here. Let me do a pan. Let me work with slow mo. Let me do all of this, but with not really a whole lot of focus behind it. And it just shows that the director is very disheartened and just isn't really into what he's doing beyond the paycheck. And on one hand, I can't fully blame Rupert for taking this job. It is an industry after all. And as a director, it's not like people were banging down his door to give him a job. He's got to pay the bills, he's got to pay the rent. So I can't necessarily completely blame him for taking this job. But I hope that he would have put more effort into it, though. Considering that this probably, sadly, will probably wind up being the last theatrical film that he's ever going to direct. Because this industry is very cold and unfeeling. You fuck up, you're out on the curb. And I think that's also the explanation for his very defensive reaction to this film's criticism. He really disappointed me when he talked about fans being toxic in response to criticisms of this film. Dude, don't go the Samuel Bayer route. Don't go the route of Paul Feig. It's not a route you should ever choose to go down. But at the same time, he's acting out of desperation. This is a desperate man who is now in the state of denial. It's over. It's over for Rupert. I think he even knew it while he was shooting this film, and he knew this film was going to bomb. He knew it wasn't going to do well critically, and this is him lashing out. And instead of him looking inward and owning his mistakes and owning his own contributions to this film's failure and the failure of his career, he decides to attack the fans. It's a shame, but that is the explanation for it. Because this industry is cold and will throw away directors like a bad habit if they have any excuse or any reason to do so. And, after what he did with this, I don't blame anybody for not wanting to give him another chance or another shot. Because what you'll get is just very lazy, unenthusiastic direction. And I guess that kind of direction is almost fitting for this film, though. How lazy it is and how dull the movie is overall. But at the same time, I can't help but feel a little disappointed. Because I know Rupert can do better. That's the thing. He's not a director who, in my opinion, is on the level of some of these other hacks who have gotten multiple films or are doing a lot of these direct to streaming movies and have done like 20 or 30 movies at this point. I don't think he's on that level. I don't think he's that bad of a filmmaker. I think if he has the right project with the right script and he has passion for it, I think he can turn in a product that is actually pretty damn good. But maybe he just doesn't have it in him anymore. And that is something that can happen to even more talented directors than Rupert Sanders, where you just lose it. Whatever talent you might have had over time, it just dissipates and then it fades away. And I would be very surprised if Rupert Sanders had any sort of career comeback after this film. Now, the screenplay is by Zach Balin and William Schneider. And this script is really awful. This is a bad screenplay. And what's crazy is that it actually does try to be more than just a carbon copy of the 1994 film. It focuses more on the relationship between Eric and Shelley. It fleshes that out a lot more. It has more of a supernatural angle going on with the villain. It has a different approach in a multitude of different ways. But they're all different approaches that are just badly done. It's like the writers just decided to make every possible bad decision they could when it comes to the differences with this film in comparison to the 1994 movie. It is a film that is so different when it comes to the structure of the script that the only thing that it has in common with the 1994 film is the title and the fact that there's characters named Eric, Draven, and Shelley. Other than that, there's nothing else about this that is even remotely similar. Everything about this script is very different tonally. It's very different structurally. And the differences just honestly showcase the sheer brilliance of the script of the 1994 film more than anything else. Because it shows that a lot of the things that made the 1994 film great were its subtleties, were how it handled emotion in a more resonant way, were how it handled its characters, and how it balanced the tone of the story. And this just royally fucks up everything that made the 1994 film work and James O'Barr's comic work. And it's absolutely astonishing how atrocious this script is on a fundamental level. So it automatically, right away, just starts off on the worst possible foot, because it spends 40 something minutes, if not more time than that, focusing on this love story between Eric and Shelley. And if Eric and Shelley as characters were compelling and they were interesting, then this could work. But the screenwriters never even bother to try to make these characters likable or compelling. They make them into junkies who meet in rehab and then become basically fuck buddies. And then we're supposed to buy that they're madly in love with one another, and they're saying lines like "you're my person" and so on and so forth. And it comes across as painfully forced, about as painfully forced as a dildo rammed up your ass without any provocation. And it's just one of those things where you're just like, I get what the writer is trying to do, but you're just going about it the wrong way. It doesn't help either that the scenes involving Eric and Shelley are cringe as fuck. I do not like these characters. I don't like their relationship. One of the first scenes between the two at rehab or prison / rehab is Shelley asking Eric, "Do you want to hear a bad joke?" Uh, okay. I mean, it's really bad. Are you sure? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. What is the hardest tea to swallow? Uh, I don't know. Reality. That's an actual line. Or that's an actual bit of dialogue in this shitty script. Is that. And there's more where that comes from. And for a film called The Crow, you don't see him become the Crow until like way, way, way too late. Because they spend too long on this love story that is just not at all really anything that you're that emotionally connected to, despite the writer's best efforts. And then you have this whole thing with the villain, this guy who somehow has this deal with the devil, who manipulates people into killing other people, named Roig. And he has a connection with Shelley because he manipulated her one night to kill her friend, and another friend of hers shot the death with a cell phone, and now she's being targeted by Roig and his men because she has this cell phone that her friend decided to give her. Now she's got a target on her back. Eric doesn't know about any of this, and he gets roped up into it. And then one night, Roig and his men show up, break into Eric and Shelley's apartment, and kill Eric and Shelley. And even the way that they die is just very boring. Plastic bags over the head, and they suffocate. So they can't even do anything inventive or wild or unique with the way that they die. It's lazy in that way too. And Eric dies. He winds up in some purgatory that is literally just a green screen with some really fake looking CGI backdrops with a bunch of crows because it's the Crow. And there's this guy who's there who is kind of like the Skull Cowboy, but not really. And he's like the mentor and the guide for Eric and gives him the this power. Or he's given this power because he's got true love for Shelley. And he comes back to life, and then it becomes a really tedious and boring, lackluster revenge movie where he becomes a crow, but not yet. He's just a guy who's undead who doesn't really know what he's doing and is a bull in a china shop and spends most of the time just getting his ass kicked or getting shot or getting ran over instead of kicking some ass. That's exactly what you want to see, right? In a Crow film, you want to see the resurrected corpse of Eric Draven just flail around and spend most of his time looking like an absolute fucking pussy. That's really what you want to see, right? Isn't it? So it's like they didn't learn any lessons from crap like Wicked Prayer. We already got enough of that in that piece of shit. Why do we need to see more of that? And eventually he gets shot. And then even his own mentor is like, hey, dude, you're a fuck up. What the hell? And he loses his powers because he doesn't trust Shelley anymore, doesn't have true love for her, because he doubts her, because he finds the cell phone footage. And I'm like, you know what? He's got a right to. You did a bad job, screenwriters, because I don't really necessarily buy the logic behind him having this just undaunting I don't think that's a word, but this unbridled love for her that has no bounds when he sees that video. I would probably have my doubts too. But because he has doubts, he loses his power and he dies again. And then he makes a deal with the guide to sell his soul to the devil, who then resurrects him. And then he decides to actually finally become the Crow. Like, that's when he becomes the Crow. That's when he puts on the face paint. That's when he actually, I guess, can fight now and can actually be a bit of a badass in a scene in an opera house where he's taking out these guys right and left with a sword and decapitating people, cutting people's faces in half lengthwise. Sure, a lot of it is CGI, but some of it is practical. And that's when the film actually is kind of fun, but it's very fleeting. It's not something that lasts very long at all. Because then you get the finale where he confronts Roig and he brings Roig into the purgatory, and I guess he finds a way to snap out of Roig's mind control and then tricks him and then throws him into this lake, which might as well be literally made out of shit. And then he gets eaten by a bunch of shitty eels, and that's it for your villain. He gets thrown into a shitty CGI lake, and then gets eaten by what honestly might as well be shit heels. And that's it. That's it for your main villain, your main bad guy. And then you have this really dumb, aggravating twist at the end where Eric sacrifices himself and dies and goes to hell in order for Shelley to be brought back. And I'm like, you shouldn't even call yourself the Crow anymore. You're the fucking simp. like Jesus Christ, man. Fuck. And that's aggravating too. Like, because if you're a fan of Eric Draven, they basically just dropped Trow and took a steaming dump all over him right in front of your eyes. Because it's like, oh, Eric Draven, oh, he's not the important character of the story. It's a Shelley. And I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, God damn it. This script not only took a massive shit all over Eric Draven, but it also did an equally poor, just really a bad job of handling everyone else. Shelley isn't very likable. Shelley isn't a very engaging character. The villains, they're either lame or laughable. Say whatever you want about the 1994 film, which in my opinion still holds up brilliantly. The villains were just as memorable and just as iconic as the hero was. It's a big part of why that film still holds up, is because you got Top Dollar and his henchmen, and they got their different personalities, and they have their different ways of really leaving an impression on the audience. No one in this film leaves an impression beyond indifference or wow, that was a really poorly written character, or wow, that performance sucked ass. Other than that, there is no other impression that these characters leave. And that's a prime example of a quality script, is its characters. You can do all the different new spins on the story of the Crow you want, but if you don't have a good, strong characters to couple with that, it doesn't work. It doesn't fly. You could have adapted some of the other spin-offs and some of the other comics that were a part of the Crow franchise that were a lot better than whatever the fuck this was. But no. We gotta make our own original a story, an original script. And here's the thing. If you can't do that well, then why are you doing that at all? Why don't you just take a script or a plot idea that already existed and then use that as a jumping off point? If you're so incompetent and so bad at your job, you can't write an original script worth the shit anyway. And for a film called The Crow, it's just not a story and a script that has the same emotional power that the 1994 film did and the James O'Barr comic did. Something that's very integral to the success of The Crow in general. You need to have that emotional core. I never felt it once. I never felt like this script and this story had a soul. Even if you had better action throughout, without a soul, it's just empty. It's empty and hollow inside. I also feel that this film features an equally bad cast. Bill Skarsgård as Eric Draven, the Crow. This was not a good casting choice. Similar to Joel Kinnaman in RoboCop. I didn't buy it at all. I didn't buy him as this emo punk character. Seemed like he was posing, despite all the tattoos they put on his body. The performance was just very lackadaisical, not really a lot of energy behind it. Almost sounded like he was slurring his lines at points. Just completely lifeless from beginning to end. And him being so defensive about his performance in this is laughable to me. Like, bro, you fucking sucked. Like, why are you being so defensive over a really shitty performance that'll probably go down as like one of your worst of your career? Like, own it. I have a lot of respect for Dakota Johnson. Like, she's just like, yeah, that Madam Web sucked, and I don't think I was really that great in it either. I don't know if she called herself out though, but I know that she called out the movie. But you got Skarsgård over here trying to defend the film and defend his performance, and I'm like, dude, you weren't any better than anyone else who has tried to play the Crow in any of these other incarnations of the character. You sucked just as much. In fact, you sucked worse. You were worse than Eric Mabius. And FKA Twigs, oh my god, this actress is abysmal. This woman cannot fucking act, even if her life depended on it. If she had to deliver just an adequate performance in order to prevent her from getting her head blown off, she would fail. She's that bad of an actress. She has no chemistry whatsoever with Skarsgård, which is another reason why that love story completely failed. And no personality, no charm, no charisma. She's had so much Botox and plastic surgery done to her face. She looks like she's a literal real doll. I don't understand why the hell she was even casted in this. This has to be some kind of nepotism hire or some shit. Or she pulled some strings or did some favors. Because it's not her talent as an actress that gave her this job. Danny Huston isn't any better. just completely sleepwalking his way through the entire film with another lazy bad guy performance that he's done a million times in his sleep. His performance was every bit as forgettable as like the other bad guy Valen in or Fallon or whatever the fuck his name was in the RoboCop remake. Josette Simon as Sophia Webster. I mean, there really isn't anything to say. I think she had like 2 scenes. Laura Birn as Marion, Rogue's right hand woman. Like, she did not really provide much other than vibes. And the vibes weren't that great. Sami Bouajila as Kronos, the spirit that guides Eric in his mission. The guy was just biding his time until he could collect his paycheck. That's really what Sammy was doing. Isabella Wei as Zadie, Shelley's friend. You know what? I actually think the few scenes that she was in, she did a better job than FKA Twigs. She wasn't great, but she wasn't fucking awful either, so maybe she should have been Shelley. It checks off the box for representation, which is what the casting director was definitely trying to do with the cast in this. Still wouldn't save the film, but would make it a little bit less awful. Jordan Bolger as Chance, this tattoo artist. I mean, this guy almost acted like he was reading off his lines off of tattoos that were on either his body or on other people's body. It was just a really poor cast. And equally as poor when it comes to the other production elements, you know, the other technical elements of the film. The cinematography by Steve Annis was absolute anus. It really was. This film did not look good. The editing by Neil Smith and Chris Dickens, it gave you dick. And the music by Volker Bertelmann, man, this score wasn't good. It was just another type of score, just very atmospheric and moody, but with no real direction behind it. Nothing that really makes it stick with you. Nothing memorable about it. And the songs that they chose were really weird. They honestly affected the overall effectiveness of certain scenes. They really did. Because of these weird, out of place music choices. The Enya song that they used for the montage when Eric suits up, that wasn't too bad, but there were a lot of other songs too that just made you scratch your head. Which is another thing that the RoboCop remake did. What did these writers do? Just watch that piece of shit and then just copy everything that they failed to do well or properly in that fucking movie? Because that's what it seems like. Seems like they just watched that piece of shit and were like, yeah, you know, RoboCop, I love that. Let's use that formula. Let's copy that approach for this remake. It just sucks that you have another Crow movie and it comes out like, I think it was 30 years after the release of the first film. And to celebrate the anniversary, you get this pile of ass. And it's something that never needed to be made in the first place. There were all these signs that were pointing to it just not existing, not getting off the ground. There were numerous other attempts to try to remake this that completely failed, that never really got past production hell. And then one sneaks through the cracks. And it's made in such a soulless fashion. The 1994 film, Brandon Lee put so much of himself in that movie. It was his last contribution to cinema before his death on the set of that film. And everyone involved with that movie, they loved Brandon, appreciated him as a person and as a talent, and they tailored that film around Brandon and his spirit. And they made that film as a tribute to Brandon Lee. They could have scrapped it. The studio and other people involved, they had an opportunity to scrap it and not finish production of the film because of the accident and what happened. But everyone involved with it, they felt like they had to go on for Brandon. They even asked permission from Brandon's family to finish the movie. And they got it. And they didn't make The Crow. They didn't finish that film that they easily could have scrapped for the money, for selfish reasons. They finished it for a selfless reason, to preserve Brandon's last performance and to really solidify his legacy. They did it for him and for his fans. And to see something like this that is so soulless and so against everything that the 1994 film was, it is really upsetting to me. Especially when it comes to the fact that Brandon died making The Crow. It just seemed like they should have just never remade the movie. Because of that, just out of respect for what happened on the set of that film. And out of respect of Brandon's legacy. But no, instead we get this. Which it was a crock of shit.